This story is about reproduction, consumption, and the relentless hustle of life in a modest suburban garden. It's not, strictly speaking, a romance novel, though the flora are flirtatious, the insects indiscreet, and the occasional vertebrate occasionally enthusiastic. It is, however, a tale of ambition, biology, and the sometimes tragicomic pursuit of survival. Here, flowers advertise with the subtlety of neon signs and the covert deceit of marketing interns. Pollinators arrive with all the enthusiasm and poor judgment of partygoers at a cocktail hour. Herbivores graze with the delicate diplomacy of accountants on a bender. And predators, whether spider, bird, or mantis, execute energy transactions with the efficiency that would make even the most hardened economist blush. If you're easily offended by innuendo or humor that flirts with impropriety, you may wish to avert your eyes, or at least keep a scholarly, straight face. For everyone else, prepare to witness a garden where nectar flows like gossip, leaves are chewed with subtle suggestions, and death itself is just another form of intimacy. This is not a guide to botany, nor is it a cautionary tale. It is, if anything, a field report from a universe that mistakes reproduction for performance art, consumption for foreplay, and the relentless march of life for a scandalously entertaining narrative. And thus the cycle begins. Again.
The Garden of Earthly Frictions, a Natural History of Bad Behavior. On a dark and stormy night, an enigmatic flower bud stirred under the muted scrutiny of the moon. She was encased in a cocoon of sepals, modest yet tense like a debutante on the eve of a scandalous ball. When conditions aligned, humidity, light, and whatever internal hormonal chaos plants experience, the sepals peeled back with the slow, deliberate grace of a misbehaving librarian, revealing a blossom designed not for subtlety, but for influence. The petals themselves were a study in biological seduction, vibrant in ultraviolet patterns that screamed, "I am free, I am fertile, I will take what I can get." At her center rose the carpel, a monument so phallic in design that an undergraduate might blush, yet entirely female in function. Crowning the style, the stigma glistened with mucilage, receptive and smug, a bioadhesive invitation to any sufficiently pollen-laden suitor. Surrounding her, the stamens quivered on their filaments, anthers swollen with ambition, shedding pollen into the breeze with all the subtlety of a billboard for reproductive opportunity. The flower could self-pollinate, but she didn't. Selfing is the botanical equivalent of dating your cousin. Efficient, but frowned upon outside a few rural counties, and certainly not good for your reputation. Cross-pollination was riskier, but infinitely more rewarding, evolutionarily speaking, and thus she waited. Enter Apis mellifera, the fur-covered libertine and unrepentant courier of gametes. He approached the corolla like an intern at a cash bar, buzzing with nervous energy and magnetic charge. His legs brushed the anthers. Pollen clung to his thorax with all the subtlety of a clingy ex. Oblivious, he zipped to the next flower, unknowingly completing the transaction the first flower had so patiently engineered. Cross-pollination, nature's original dating app with zero privacy settings. Not all pollinators were as conscientious. A hummingbird, metabolic rate off the charts, hovered like a caffeinated winged narcissist, plunging his bill into deep corollas and leaving a dusting of pollen in his wake. He was fast, flashy, and entirely selfish, a vivid reminder that beauty is a strategic investment in survival. Meanwhile, butterflies fluttered in, their visits languid and performative, sipping nectar like aristocrats at a buffet and rarely bothering to deposit pollen with any discernible intent. Beetles arrived, chewing petals indiscriminately, disrupting delicate reproductive machinations with the subtlety of a bull in a florist shop. By mid-morning, the garden was in full swing. Bees carried pollen like giggling teenagers smuggling contraband. Hummingbirds made aerial laps of vacillating intent. Butterflies and beetles performed their own disinterested rituals. And the plants, draped in chemical signals, whispered to each other in volatile compounds, gossiping about who had visited, who had been faithful, and who had completely ignored protocol. Evolution, as ever, treated all of this as a logistical problem rather than a moral one. Beneath the drama, roots intertwined with fungi in the soil, exchanging carbon and nutrients with the efficiency of a well-staffed lab. Injured plants sent chemical warnings like mass emails gone viral. Beware the caterpillars. They are sticky, persistent, and emotionally complicated. Even in the dark subterranean world, the scandal continued. By afternoon, the flower's ovary quietly began to swell. Fertilization occurred discreetly, invisible to all but the most attentive eyes. Love, sex, and reproductive success were messy, chaotic, and entirely impersonal. Nature, as always, was both brilliant and cruel. With pollination behind her, the flower, proud and slightly euphoric, found herself under siege. The buffet opened without invitation. A caterpillar arrived first, jaw muscles flexing with the zeal of a culinary critic. He chewed through leaves with rhythmic devotion, a larval gourmand in a world without table manners. The plant, unable to scream in any audible sense, released a bouquet of volatile organic compounds, invisible SOS signals that nearby plants intercepted and responded to with their own chemical arsenals. Alkaloids, tannins, and latex surged through her tissues, a defensive cocktail designed to discourage further nibbling. The caterpillar, equipped with the proper enzymes, was largely unfazed. Nature, it seemed, considered resilience sexy. Aphids joined the fray, piercing the foam and sucking sap with relentless, parthenogenic vigor. They reproduced without males, without shame, and without consulting their hosts. Effectively, a botanical Ponzi scheme. Ants soon arrived, attracted to the honeydew excreted by the aphids, stroking their abdomens to coax out more droplets. The aphids tolerated it. The ants clearly enjoyed it. Mutualism, in this case, was indistinguishable from organized debauchery. The plant, injured but not defeated, activated further defenses. Jasmonic acid triggered latex exudation, sticky, bitter, and very effective at discouraging mouthparts. Nearby predatory wasps interpreted the chemical signals as invitations to hunt. They deposited eggs inside caterpillars, converting herbivores into incubation chambers. Revenge, measured in nitrogen-rich larvae, is often the sweetest kind. Meanwhile, grazers arrived. Rabbits nibbled stems with the tenderness of someone who thought decorum mattered, while deer sampled buds like they were tasting fine wine. Each act of consumption redistributed nutrients, energy, and occasionally dignity. Seeds were dispersed when birds swallowed fruit whole, ensuring the next generation would begin life distant from parental scorn. Below ground, nematodes, fungi, and microbes exploited the wounded roots, siphoning nutrients in the silent, patient way that only soil organisms can. Life, it seemed, continued whether anyone consented or not. By nightfall, the garden had been transformed. Leaves were perforated, buds bruised, and petals trampled in a haze of ecological excess. Yet beneath the apparent chaos, energy moved predictably up and down the food chain. Every bite, sting, and slurp was a transfer of resources, a transaction executed without moral concern. As darkness fell, the garden's daytime dramas gave way to the nocturnal economy of predation. A spider's web shimmered like a suspended contract. Insects blundered into sticky silk with tragic inevitability. The spider, patient and precise, wrapped her catches with clinical efficiency. Predation is nothing if not negotiation without negotiation. The prey provides biomass, the predator converts it to energy, and the web benefits from selective pruning of population. Nearby, a praying mantis waited like a nun attending mass, devouring suitors with the same deliberate grace one might use to grade student papers. Post-copulatory decapitation, while brutal, efficiently recycles nitrogen into the reproductive output. Love and protein transfer in this ecosystem are indistinguishable. Birds contributed as well. Robins hunted worms, chickadees nabbed caterpillars, and the local hawk maintained order with aerodynamic impunity. Apex predators, cats, foxes, occasional raccoons kept populations in check, maintaining the balance between chaos and stability, destruction and nourishment. Inevitably, all this carnage funneled into decomposition. Fungi invaded fallen leaves and decaying stems with enzymatic appeal. Bacteria followed with flagella whips and chemical cocktails, and earthworms churned it all into nutrient-rich soil. Nothing was wasted. The detrital network ensured that yesterday's excess fueled tomorrow's productivity. Life and death are merely two phases of the same nutrient exchange, often more intimate than any pollination. Rains seep through soil layers, delivering dissolved molecules back to plant roots. Mycorrhizal networks ferried carbon, nitrogen, and gossip alike. Who had been fertilized, eaten, or decomposed? The garden's scandalous cycles continued invisibly with patience and precision. By dawn, new buds had begun to form, tight and hopeful, ready to repeat the entire sequence of seduction, consumption, predation, and decay. The flower from the beginning, now fruiting and fertilized, looked on quietly. Life persisted not because it was moral, dignified, or polite, but because it was relentless, resourceful, and very, very good at getting what it wanted. Somewhere in the soil, microbes burped contentedly. Above them, petals unfurled to the sun, and the garden, in all its chaotic, scandalous glory, whispered to the morning, "Back to work."